You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to a special Juneteenth edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk. And for those of you who don't know what Juneteenth is, it celebrates the end of slavery in Texas, and it has grown to represent all the progress that African Americans have made in this country, from being slaves to being 3/5 of a citizen to now having full rights. Or at least they should have full rights. They really don't, because they're the victims of police brutality every day. But that's not what I want to talk about. I also don't want to talk about yesterday's show where I got into it with someone about my views on the Giants draft class. Nothing bad, I was glad to do it. But it's the first conversation I've ever had like that on YouTube. It was fun, I liked it. Hey, that's what this show is. It is a healthy debate. It is a forum for healthy debate. Nothing wrong with that. Instead, I want to talk about that other New York team. The team that I root for. The Jets, just end the sufferings. And I can't even say endure, because it doesn't get much worse than this. It doesn't get much worse than the best player your team has asking for a trade. You want to tell me that Jamal Adams shouldn't be the best player on a team? It shouldn't be a safety? I'm with you there. The Jets don't have a lot of talent. Go up and down this roster. Tell me a better player on the team. It's not Le'Veon Bell. It's not Sam Darnold. It's not Quinnen Williams. It's no one. It has to be Jamal Adams. The Jets have one of the worst rosters in the league. And now that roster is going to be made infinitely worse. But this isn't on the Jets. It's on the Jets a little bit, but I'll get into that later. I want to talk about the human piece of garbage that is Jamal Adams. And I'm done with this guy. I want him gone. I'm sick of the nonsense. I am sick of this guy's BS. Alright? You signed a contract. You signed a contract that every other first rounder in 2017 signed. Everyone else is honoring that contract. The Panthers chose to engage Christian McCaffrey in extension talks. You know why they did that? Christian McCaffrey is the whole Panthers team. Without McCaffrey, that team goes 0-16. I don't care who the coach is. I don't care who's on the defense. I don't care about the quarterback. I don't care about the wide receivers. Without Christian McCaffrey, the Carolina Panthers are going 0-16. The Chiefs are going to sign Patrick Mahomes to a record-breaking extension soon. Patrick Mahomes is the defending Super Bowl MVP. Patrick Mahomes orchestrated 3 straight comebacks in the playoffs. Whatever contract Patrick Mahomes gets, it won't be enough. And you're trying to put yourself on their level. A strong safety. The least important position on the football field. Without Greg Williams, you're nothing. You were not the player under Todd Bowles that you were under Greg Williams. You know why? Because strong safeties are replaceable. You're not Troy Polamalu. You're not Ronnie Lott. You're not Ed Reed. You're not Earl Thomas. You're not Paul Krause. You're none of them. In your 3 seasons in the league, the Jets have gone 16-32. They haven't even sniffed the playoffs. The only year that they didn't finish in last place in the division was last year because the Miami Dolphins were tanking for Tua. And this guy is putting himself in the upper echelon of NFL players as someone who warrants a record-breaking extension now. I have to get my money now. This guy is nothing short of delusional. Instead of giving him a contract, the Jets should gift him a brain scan. On what planet does this guy deserve a contract extension right now? The only reason why a team would extend a player now, like Jamal Adams, who's from that draft class, was because that team knows he's irreplaceable. Christian McCaffrey is irreplaceable. Patrick Mahomes is irreplaceable. Jamal Adams isn't. You know, this guy just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand the business. He signed a contract that ties him to the Jets for a maximum of 6 years. You have the 4 guaranteed years, the 5th-year team option, which the Jets exercised, and the franchise tag year. So the Jets can keep him around for 6 years. After that, he's free to walk. If he really hates it in New York, if he wants to play for his hometown team, he can go. But he has to wait 6 years. He's not special. Jamal Adams is not special. Instead of honoring his contract, he wants the money now. I'm not begrudging him for wanting his money now. And if the Jets were to sign him to an extension, great. Fantastic. But it has to be for a reasonable amount. The theme of this new regime with Douglas and Gase is asset allocation. They're not going to spend a lot of money at replaceable positions. Strong safety is a replaceable position. Running back is sort of kind of a replaceable position. If you have a guy like a McCaffrey or an Ezekiel Elliott or a Derrick Henry, go for it. Keep him. That's not replaceable. But Le'Veon Bell is nowhere near the player now that he was in Pittsburgh. That makes it a replaceable position. And we know that Gase doesn't want Bell to have that contract. Which is fine. Spend the money at more important positions. That makes sense. It makes sense to devote a ton of resources to the offensive line when you have Sam Darnold auditioning for the next Ghostbusters movie. No one is saying that the Jets won't extend Jamal Adams. He just wants his money now. He's trying to force the issue. He's not that special. He's not the kind of player that can do that. Let me ask you this. To any fan out there of a team that Jamal Adams listed on his wish list, Chiefs, Niners, Cowboys, Ravens, whoever, Seahawks, it doesn't matter. Do you want a guy who thinks he's better than everyone else? Who thinks the rules don't apply to him? Who thinks, hey, I want my money now. I don't care about the contract I signed. I want my money now. Do you want a guy like that? Because I'll tell you, I don't. At this point, I don't care what the Jets get for Jamal Adams. I just don't anymore. All right? The guy has now turned into a locker room cancer. And in a fragile locker room, like the Jets' locker room, that cancer needs to be removed. Now, I understand that the Jets can't give him away. And I spent a lot of last night thinking about reasonable trade packages for Jamal Adams. I didn't go through all 31 other teams. I just went through the 70 listed. And the team I zeroed in on was the Cowboys. Because they are definitely interested in him. We know that. They made an offer at the deadline last year, which is where this all started. I mean, of course the Jets are going to engage in trade discussions with everyone. The Jets were engaged in trade discussions with Quinnen Williams, for God's sake. They didn't do it, but they still took the call. Put yourself in that mindset for a minute. The Jets were 1-6. Sam Darnold had missed 3 games because of mono. And when he came back, he was seeing ghosts. He was terrible. Of course the Jets are going to be engaged in trade discussions with everyone. No one was untouchable. They were 1-6. They were a laughingstock. They were one of the worst teams in the NFL. Tell me one good reason, Jamal, why the Jets wouldn't engage in trade discussions about you. And yeah, you were upset. Look, I understand why you'd be upset. No one wants to be in trade rumors. It's tough for the player. I understand that. But it's a business, you idiot. You have to deal with it. This is what you signed up for. It's not like you have a no trade clause or anything. The Jets can trade you. That's their right. No, they didn't. They thought highly enough of you to not trade you. You want to tell me that decision to engage in trade discussions drove that much of a rift between you and the Jets? Man, I'll tell you, I mean, there are no words to describe how ridiculous that is. I mean, there are, but I'm not going to say them on this show. Just suck it up and deal with it. It's done. You weren't traded. Move on. You're allowed to be upset. Go to the coach, go to the GM, and say, hey, I don't like that my name was mentioned in trade rumors. I want to be here for my whole career. I don't like that I was almost traded. No one would begrudge you for that. And it seemed like everything was going in the right direction. Your tone changed throughout the second half because the Jets were playing better, 6-2 in their last 8, which speaks to another point, but I'll get into it in a minute. There's a lot I need to get to. They finished the season 7-9, the best record Jamal Adams ever had in the NFL. The best season the Jets have had since Todd Bowles' first year as coach. Everyone knows that to keep that momentum up, the Jets need Jamal Adams to keep his great play up. No one is doubting the talent that Jamal Adams is. Jamal Adams is the best strong safety in the NFL and is one of the best safeties in all of football. Okay, no question. And Adams was a big part of some of those Jets wins. The Cowboys game, he was a big part of that. The Giants game, he was a big part of that. But that doesn't negate the fact that the Jets, in your 3 years with them, have been a laughingstock, have been terrible. They've been through 2 coaches in your 3 years. I'm not saying it's all because of you, but you know what? If you were as great as you think you are, the Jets would have been a playoff team. All right? Great players make it into the playoffs. Christian McCaffrey made the playoffs in his rookie year, 2017. And last year, he was in the MVP discussion. And let me tell you, McCaffrey was a big part of the Panthers getting to the playoffs. McCaffrey had the most catches out of any Panther in that year with 80. And he had the second most receiving yards and the second most touchdowns. He was a big reason why they got there. Jamal Adams has proven that he cannot be the best player on a playoff team. You know why? Because he's a strong safety. There was a report that literally just came out. According to Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, Adams is seeking $20 million a year. $20 million a year for a strong safety and one who has done nothing in this league. I don't give a damn about the regular season. I care about the playoffs. We know you're a great regular season player. No one is diminishing the type of player you are. But $20 million a year should only go to proven playoff performers. If Jamal Adams was making big hits and great interceptions in playoff games, give him $20 million. Easy. But for a guy who's never even sniffed the playoffs, $20 million is ridiculous. And the fact that he seriously wants that proves that this guy is nothing short of an idiot. The guy doesn't know his own value. The guy doesn't know his worth. The guy doesn't know who he is. He needs to know his place. I want to go back to his 7 preferred teams. The Chiefs, Niners, Cowboys, Ravens, Eagles, Texans, and Seahawks. All of those 7, with the exception of the Cowboys, made the playoffs last year. And the Cowboys have been in the playoffs recently. Jamal Adams is from Texas. Maybe he grew up rooting for the Cowboys. I actually don't know. But the Cowboys are, by far and away, the best landing spot for reasons that I'm going to get into in a minute. But Jamal Adams has not earned the right to demand a trade to a playoff team. Jamal Adams has been in this league for 3 years. That's the equivalent of Myles Garrett saying, I want to be traded from the Browns to a playoff team. You haven't earned the right to demand a trade to a playoff team. I mean, this guy is literally stupid. Alright, the guy needs a brain scan. The guy needs an IQ test. If you're frustrated with the losing, be a part of the change. Recruit some superstars here. There were rumors when the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, was a free agent that Jamal Adams was talking to him and trying to recruit him to the Jets. It didn't work. The Honey Badger signed somewhere else. If Jamal Adams really wants to play for a playoff team, be a part of the change here. You want to tell me that you don't think the core that the Jets have can be a playoff team? Fine. I'm understanding of that. But be a part of the change. Why aren't you out there trying to recruit big players here? Instead of trying to join big players somewhere else. This just proves to me that this guy's a front runner. He's a mercenary. Whatever word you want to use. And it goes back to a previous point. If you're a fan of one of these teams, do you really want a guy like that? I understand, teams like the Chiefs and the Ravens, they're going to be in the playoffs for a long time. But if you're a fan of one of those borderline playoff teams, how can you want this guy? The first sign of trouble, he's going to want out. It's very rare that you're going to make the playoffs every year. Teams have lean years. It happens. It stinks. You're allowed to get upset over it if you're a fan of that team, but it happens. The second that team has a lean year, Jamal Adams is going to want out. I'll tell you, if I was a fan of the Chiefs or the Ravens, I wouldn't want Jamal Adams. Let's say, God forbid, something happens to Mahomes or something happens to Lamar Jackson. I hope it doesn't, all right? Knock on wood. The second that happens, Jamal Adams is going to want out. He's going to say, forget about it, not going to play, not going to make the playoffs this year. I want out. Oh, but Jacob, he'll be happy. He'll have gotten his big money deal. No. According to Calvin Watkins of the Dallas Morning News, if Adams is traded to one of those teams, or as Watkins says it, certain teams, he won't request a contract extension right away. So let's say, just hypothetically, he gets traded to the Seahawks. I'll use a different team. And let's say Russell Wilson gets hurt. Again, knock on wood. Jamal Adams will not have signed an extension, and Jamal Adams will want out. And the Seahawks will have the same headache that the Jets have. This guy wants what everyone wants. Alright, his wants are valid. He wants to make a lot of money. Every NFL player has a limited shelf life. Alright, there's a chance that the first play from scrimmage that Jamal Adams plays next year, he breaks his neck. And that's it. I understand wanting that financial security. And I understand wanting to win. But you have to earn that right. Jamal Adams has not earned that. Jamal Adams has only spent 3 seasons in the NFL. No player going into their 4th year has earned that right. Patrick Mahomes wouldn't have earned that right. Christian McCaffrey wouldn't have earned that right. I gotta tell you, I'd have more respect for Jamal Adams if he said, I want to go to a good team regardless of the money. But now that he brought up the $20 million, that just proves that he's a front runner. He's a mercenary. Whatever word you want to use. I understand that, you've proven that you're a great player in this league, and the Jets have done nothing to support you, to help get you into the playoffs. I can see how that would be upsetting. And if Jamal Adams wanted to say, build a good team around me, or that's it, I'm out, I could respect that. The guy wants to win. I'll never begrudge a player for that. But to bring up the $20 million a year, to bring up these crazy contract values, to top Eddie Jackson, that's just absurd. You'll get your money in due time. Just be patient. No, I want it now. I think I'm better than everyone. Well, like I said, another team can have that headache. I'm done with them. Before I get into the trade that I want for Jamal Adams, I want to go into how this looks for the Jets, for Douglas and Gase. And by the way, there will be no trifecta today. This is just going to be Jamal Adams. Sorry for only doing one story, but this is the biggest sports story we've had, not counting the NHL and the NBA resuming play and the MLB labor discussions since probably the NFL draft. And maybe not even then, because there was really no drama at the top. Andrew Thomas was a surprise pick, but it was the 4th overall pick. If they were surprised at the 1st overall pick, okay, that would be a huge story. At 4, it's lessened a little bit. This is the biggest sports story we've had since Tom Brady left for the Buccaneers, if you don't want to talk about the draft. So it deserves a lot of attention. Like I said, this is going to be it for today. But I want to talk about how this looks for Douglas and Gase. I'll start with Gase. The people vilifying Adam Gase for this, I understand that I'm one of the few Adam Gase supporters out there. And when you're in that position, you have to support the guy regularly. You can't take a day off. But to these people that are trying to put this on Adam Gase, I mean, for God's sake. How? How do you make that quantum leap in logic? Just when I thought this would be focusing on Jamal Adams and Joe Douglas, people bring in Adam Gase to this. Do you think that if Todd Bowles was still the coach of this team, Jamal Adams wouldn't want out? He still wouldn't want a big contract, and he still wouldn't want to go to a winning team? Oh, but Jacob, the Jets could have hired Eric Bieniemy. They would have been better. They wouldn't have been a losing team. First up, you don't know that. I agree with you that I'd have preferred Bieniemy to Gase. Bieniemy was at the top of my list when the Jets fired Bowles. But the simple fact is, we don't know how good of a coach Bieniemy is going to be in the next level. He hasn't gotten that opportunity yet. He should have that opportunity. I don't know why he hasn't gotten it. It's not because he's African American, I'll tell you that. But we just don't know how good of a head coach he's going to be. There have been a lot of sexy head coaching candidates that have failed. Adam Gase was a sexy head coaching candidate. When he was with Peyton Manning, when Manning had that incredible season where he broke all of Marino's records, when he went to the Bears and worked wonders there. There were a lot of teams that were vying for him. He went to the Dolphins. Only made one playoff game. The way everyone was talking up Gase when he went to Miami, he would have led them to heights that Marino couldn't. The idea that if the Jets had hired Eric Bieniemy, or had kept Todd Bowles, or had hired any coach other than Adam Gase, that this wouldn't have happened with Jamal Adams, that is just ludicrous. That is nothing short of ludicrous. His wants wouldn't have changed. Do you really think he'd be more amenable to being patient with the Jets if anyone other than Gase was the head coach? I mean, that's just ridiculous. That is a ridiculous mindset. This is not on Adam Gase at all. None whatsoever. This is more on Joe Douglas. And this is a point that I think Rich Cimini brought up of ESPN, best Jets beat writer there is. He said something to the effect of, trading Jamal Adams now doesn't help the Jets for this coming season. And I agree with him for the most part. I'll get into why I don't agree with him wholeheartedly in a minute. But Joe Douglas had every opportunity to trade Jamal Adams. He could have done it at the deadline. He didn't. Okay, fine. He could have done it before the draft. The Jets could have had the 11th and maybe 17th overall picks. Think about this. They could have had Mekhi Becton and CeeDee Lamb. In fact, they may still have CeeDee Lamb. There are some people on Twitter, and this won't happen. This will never happen in a million years. But there are some people on Twitter that are proposing a super trade. A trade that, if it happened, would probably cause your Madden disc to break instantly. It's Sam Darnold and Jamal Adams for Dak Prescott and either CeeDee Lamb or Michael Gallup. I mean, I'll tell you, as a Jets fan, I would do it. I like Prescott more than I like Darnold. I'd be open to that kind of a super trade, but it's not going to happen. Could the Cowboys trade CeeDee Lamb? I guess it's possible, but it's unlikely. But the Jets could have traded Adams before anyone knew Lamb was going to slip to 17. I don't think anyone was more surprised that Lamb slipped to the Cowboys than Jerry Jones. I mean, Douglas had every opportunity to make this trade to improve this team for this season. He blew it. Joe Douglas has punted this season. Again, the Jets have a terrible roster. It's not about this coming season. It's never been about this coming season. Douglas approached free agency with that mindset. I disagree with it, but that's his mindset. It's always been about 2 years from now. Again, I've heard that a million times as a Jets fan. I disagree with it wholeheartedly, but whatever. That's his view. That's his vision. He's the GM. He has the right to execute it. But by doing that, you have doomed this team to, if you trade Jamal Adams, probably a 4-win season. And there's no way Gase can survive that. Even though it won't be his fault, the calls for his head will be too much. Douglas couldn't withstand it. Gase couldn't withstand it. No one could withstand it. Douglas really put Gase behind the 8 ball with the way he approached this offseason. But there's a way that he can salvage it. And this is why I said I agree with Cimini for the most part. Again, I was thinking about this all night. I went through the 7 teams that he wants to go through. I didn't go through the 31 other teams. The Cowboys make the most sense. The Cowboys have the most interest in Adams. It's a perfect fit. And I have no problem with Jamal Adams being traded to the Cowboys. But it has to be for the right package. There are some people that have thrown out CeeDee Lamb. Not going to happen. I think the Cowboys are too high on Lamb that to trade him for a guy who's going to want a big money contract at some point, it won't be worth it. But Michael Gallup makes perfect sense. I like Gallup a lot. Going into his 3rd season, was a 1,000-yard receiver last year. His exact stats were 66 catches for 1,107 yards and 6 touchdowns. You put him with Denzel Mims, Jamison Crowder, and Brashad Perryman, that's a good wide receiver core. That's a really good wide receiver core, as a matter of fact. No excuse for Darnold to not succeed with those guys. There's another reason why I don't think Lamb is going to happen, thus making Gallup more likely. The Cowboys aren't going to trade multiple players from the same draft class. No team would do that. You'd be sacrificing your future too much. It would be too risky. I don't see that working. Well, Jacob, what are you talking about same draft class? See, I don't want multiple picks for Jamal Adams. I want multiple great assets for Jamal Adams. Doesn't necessarily have to be picks. It could be players, too. And there's a player that the Cowboys drafted behind CeeDee Lamb that I love and would make perfect sense for the Jets. And that, my friends, is Trayvon Diggs. A guy who I had as the 32nd best prospect in the draft. So he was in that late first, early second round range. I had him going 29th overall to the Titans. Ended up slipping to 51st overall. I don't know how that happened. Diggs has fantastic ball skills, great in run support, really good cover skills. I liked watching him play at Alabama. He has a good frame. And the Jets need cornerbacks. Their cornerback group right now is probably the worst in the NFL. It's Pierre Desir, Bless Austin, Brian Poole, Bryce Hall, and Quincy Wilson. That's not that good. There's upside there, but that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in me. If you put Trayvon Diggs with those corners, granted, it's still not a sure thing. Diggs can bust. But I'll tell you, it would give me a lot more confidence in that group. I wanted Diggs to slip to the Jets when they traded down so much. Think about this for a minute. Diggs, Austin, Poole, Desir, Hall, and Wilson. Yeah, I'm going with the young guns here. Greg Williams can coach these guys up. He's done it a million times before. He's one of the best defensive minds in all of football. You put Diggs on the Jets, it makes them a lot better. And if you put Gallup and Diggs on the Jets, I don't think their projected record changes that much. The Jets fill two of their biggest needs. Another player to help Darnold, which you can never have enough of, and a cornerback. Their biggest need, or their second biggest need. The biggest need is probably edge rusher. Cowboys don't have any edge rushers to give up. So, I'll take Diggs. Fill the second biggest need. The Jets will also save $5 million with that trade. That will give them room to sign Jadeveon Clowney. Another reason why I don't want an edge rusher. If the Jets can somehow parlay this into signing Jadeveon Clowney, fantastic job by Joe Douglas. Perfect job, as a matter of fact. I'd also want a first-round pick from the Cowboys, but that may be a lot to give up. Maybe I'd settle for a second or third rounder, probably a third rounder, because Gallup and Diggs is a lot to give up. But those would be my two guys. I don't want Gallup and 2 picks. I want Gallup, Diggs, and a pick. I don't want to throw away this season. It's unfair to Gase. It's unfair to Darnold. It's unfair to the fans. I would do Gallup, Diggs, and a 3rd for Adams. In fact, if the Cowboys wanted like a 5th round pick, I wouldn't mind kicking that in also. One thing's for sure, this is going to be really interesting to follow. I don't know when it's going to be resolved, obviously, but I'm going to make a promise to you. If Jamal Adams is traded on a Friday night, on a Saturday, or even Sunday morning to Sunday afternoon, I will post an emergency podcast reacting to the trade. That doesn't just go for this coming weekend. That goes for ever. It will be that important. Also, just a couple other things. I still want to do the trifecta when the NHL and the NBA resume. I'm not holding my breath over Major League Baseball resuming. But it obviously won't be as frequent. I just do the trifecta when I need to fill time. That's it. That's all it is. It's a time filler. If I don't need to fill time, I won't do it. It's just that simple. Also, I'm not going to do any team-specific shows about the Islanders and Nets until their seasons are over. I will do off-season previews. That is it. Obviously, that's just for the foreseeable future. As we get closer to the start of football season, I may give you a Jets-specific show. But that is way, way, way down the line. We don't even know for sure when football's going to start. I hope it starts on time. I hope we can have fans in the stands by then. I don't know if we will or if we won't. I don't know what's going to happen. But I'll be here to talk you through it. Until Monday, I am Jacob Valk saying that Tanyan Sturts was the only pitcher who needed touchdowns instead of runs.